Hello and welcome to the Time Well Spent podcast. My name is Devin Pennypacker, and this is a show where each week a guest and I will use our shared love of watches as a jumping off point to talk about the passions that keep us ticking, whether that is collecting, creativity, time spent outdoors, or the way we choose to explore the world. This week, I am joined by Griffin Bartsch, a fellow watch content creator and editor who I had the pleasure of getting to know during my time at Worn & Wound. He has contributed heavily to Watchbox, turned into the 1916 company, before contributing to Worn & Wound himself, with quite a few big things on the horizon, including a brand new Substack called Considered Goods. Griffin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Devin, it's awesome to be here.
Hey, so obviously you have your new Substack launching. Can you give us just a very quick elevator pitch? What is this new Substack?
Yeah, the basic idea is I've been looking around at the stuff that lives around me for the last year or so and getting kind of fed up with how much I have. And so this Substack is documenting a process I've started and I'm continuing to go through of trying to own less, own better, and just interact with things I love more on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a pretty similar ethos to, I guess, a lot of what we talk about, all the fewer, better things. We're trying to all minimize, and I guess that's going to be part of the conversation we get into here later, where we're talking about some New Year's resolutions. We have our main topic where we're going to do a bit of a retrospective. We're going to do a bit of a look back on the content that we produced last year, and then a bit of a look forward too, where we're talking about 2026 and the year going forward. But before we do that, obviously we have to start with the traditional wrist check of a watch podcast. Griffin, what do you have on your wrist?
Well, today I'm wearing the latest version of the Traska Venturer GMT.
Very cool.
I picked up an earlier version of this watch in June last year and absolutely loved it, and was running into some pain points and was thrilled to discover that the latest version of the watch solved all of them. And since August, this is one of the 2 or 3 watches I wear most regularly.
Is it green dial? Did you get the
It's
green
dial?
version? Yeah, okay,
And it's
cool.
a really deep green, almost black a lot of the time, but with just that sheen of green. And it's got this orange GMT hand that really pops. And I've been kind of describing this as a watch Rolex should have been making for 35 years.
Shot
And
across the
Traska
bow.
beat them to it.
Fair enough. Do you have a single scratch on that watch? Because obviously it is hardened. So I don't know. When I owned one, I actually did own the white dial version. That thing looked brand new the entire time I owned it.
I've worn this thing hard and it is impeccable.
Interesting. Yeah, that watch, it's funny. So I owned mine for, I think, 2 years. I wore it quite a bit, usually when traveling because it is a GMT and that's what it's for. And when I sold it, it looked brand new. And the person who got it asked me if I ever wore it. And I wore it quite a bit. You just couldn't tell. Very cool watch. I myself am wearing, actually, it's funny. I'm also wearing a green dial watch. I am wearing the Formex Reef GMT, also a travel watch, which is pretty interesting here. I don't really know why I put on the GMT today, but it's been sitting in my watch box for, I don't know, the last year without a whole lot of watch time or wear time on my wrist. And for whatever reason, I just pulled it out. I put it on my desk. I've been staring at it a lot recently and decided to just start wearing it a bit more. So this is the year, I think, where I really want to start doing that more. If I haven't worn it a whole lot in the past year, I want to pull it out. I want to look at it and really evaluate if it deserves its spot in my collection. And if it does, put it on the wrist and love it. If not, I think it's time to move on. So really, this is kind of the prove it period for the Formex Reef GMT. But this is a watch that when I was working with an editor who was abroad in Madrid, this is the only thing that kept us on track. It's the only thing that kept me knowing what time it was for him, and the only thing that made sure we were actually getting into the meetings we needed to get into. So this watch holds a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah, it's 2 takes on a green dial travel watch, coming at it from the polar opposite directions.
True. Yeah. And very different sizes too. This thing is a wrist beast. It is huge and faceted and honestly very lovely. I kind of forgot how nice it's finished. The sun bursting on the ceramic bezel, on the dial, the finishing on the indices. This is a really well-made watch for the price point, which is pretty cool.
And it sounds like it's making a pretty compelling case to not go away.
Yeah, I'm kind of annoyed by that actually, because as we'll get into in the main topic here, I won't spoil anything, but there's a resolution connected to all of that. So transitioning away from our wrist check here, let's get into before we get into the main topic. I want to talk a little bit about kind of looking back on last year, a bit of a retrospective, things that stood out to us last year and really stuck with us going into the new year, because obviously this is January 2026 and we saw a lot of things change over the last year and very, very different year from 2024. So I want to talk a little bit about market trends and new releases and sentiment amongst the community. Starting off really looking at the market as a whole, because I think it was very different than 2024. I think you tend to agree. It's definitely a different landscape going into the new year than it ever has been before.
Absolutely. I think the big headline, and we'll hit this again and again and again, was this real emphasis on the high end.
Mhm.
We saw crazy price things, but I think what we saw was the middle part of the market kind of fall out. The three, four, $5,000 stuff. There's not as much of a secondary market for it anymore. There weren't as many notable new releases, but anything over $70,000 seemed to go gangbusters. Anything below $2,000 seemed to do great. And part of that was we saw this huge shift towards these simpler, dressier watches that really caught people's attention in a big way. And it was awesome to see that you could do that with a Breguet that cost a couple $100,000 or a Denison that costs under 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, Piaget is a brand that nobody cared about 5 years ago, and now all of the sudden they're having their moment because I mean, partially because of Andy Warhol, but because of the fact that this avant-garde styling all of the sudden is very sought after. And that is a very interesting trend in the market that we're seeing unique K-shapes bracelets, which have been a big point of emphasis for a lot of brands recently, which looking back 5, 10 years ago really wasn't. Uh, that has really started to come to the forefront of the market, which I think is very interesting. But I think you're right. The middle part of the market has been a very challenging place for a lot of brands, as we've seen Tudor go upmarket and kind of abandon that middle scale. But you have seen a couple brands slip into it and do it very well, like Longines. Longines slid into that kind of $3,000 to $5,000 price point, and they are dominating that price point right now. And they're doing it with a very compelling offering. And if you look at 2025, they killed it last year. Their releases were incredible, their prices were great, and people seem to really jump on that bandwagon.
Oh, absolutely. I think if you were to look at the Swatch Group portfolio and grade each brand,
Yeah.
you'd be hard pressed to pick any brand, again, other than maybe Breguet, that had a better year than Longines. They completely outperformed Omega in terms of quality of new releases. I'm sure Omega still sold more watches. And they were a brand, when I got into watches 15 years ago, you went on Watch You Seek and asked a question like, hey, should I get a Hydro Conquest? And you got shouted down for days. And now it's the first brand anyone suggests when they're like, I think I'm ready to spend like $3,000 on a watch. The immediate answer has become Longines.
Totally. And it's one of those ones too where so another brand too, I think about it as people are graduating college. That tends to be a gift, right? People are gifted watches when they graduate college or they get their first corporate job. They buy themselves a watch or something like that. And there are other brands that used to get recommended like Young Hans or Nomos or something like that. But as those brands have gotten more expensive and have actually gotten a little closer to the Longines price point, Longines has become more compelling. And so that again, that middle market last year in 2025 got very challenging for a lot of people. And honestly, too, let's look at it and call it what it is. People have less disposable income in 2025 than they have before. And so we're seeing people be a little bit more discerning with how they're spending their money. And rather than buying one $5,000 watch, maybe they're buying, three 500 to $1,000 watches or something like that. Or maybe they're just enjoying content in general and not buying watches at all and enjoying the market for what it is, and things shifted around. We also saw too, obviously, tariffs and shipping become a huge problem within the last year, and parts scarcity and material scarcity. We thought COVID was bad. We saw kind of not to the same extent, but we saw a lot of similar issues rear their heads again this year, where people were really scrambling to try and figure out production and pricing and shipping and all of that stuff when they really weren't anticipating that being a problem on the backside of COVID again.
Well, and I think with COVID, we ran into a lot of the same or a lot of similar logistical hurdles, but that was all backstopped by this increase in interest in watches and people having disposable income to spend on things like watches and watch accessories and not traveling. And so there was this backstop that existed that just hasn't been here this time because the fundamental problem is a lack of broad access to capital and especially a lack of disposable income. And with uncertainty around tariffs and stuff, it just hammers everything home.
Yeah, it makes it difficult for people to make that jump. You know, there's no the leap of faith doesn't happen, and it makes I mean, the people working in the boutiques are probably feeling it pretty hard because they're having those conversations where it used to be, what is it, like 3 visits in order to make someone purchase a watch? It's probably 15 now. Someone's coming in and trying on that watch way more than they were before they make that buying decision. So that is an interesting thing too. But it didn't slow down the new releases. We still saw quite a few new releases this past year, and I know, I mean, we all do our end of year content, right, where we come out and we're like, this was our favorite new release of last year. This was our I don't think anyone does our least favorite new release, but we definitely think about it. um Looking back at the last year though, the thing that kind of struck me as a weird trend was, I think in 2024 I could look at the whole year of new releases and I had a hard time picking my top 3. I think in 2025 I didn't have that hard of a time. It seemed like there were a few that really floated to the top. There were a lot that kind of stayed in the middle, and then there were a lot of watches that kind of came and went. Mostly
Yeah.
because we saw a lot of limited editions, we saw a lot of collaboration models, we saw a lot of things that just they were more iterative than they were innovative. And I think again, a lot of that has to do with these market trends we're talking about here. Maybe that's my personal opinion, but that's just what I saw when looking back at the year.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, obviously all of these things are works in progress way before 2025. But I do think you saw this refinement and you look at IWC and a line like the Ingenieur, which when it was released a few years ago, people had a lot of questions about. People felt uncomfortable with the pricing. There was a lot of, yeah, this is cool, but, and I felt like that was a line that really hit its stride. And, I don't feel like IWC had as big a year this year as last year,
Yeah, but
but
that's yeah,
that's a watch I now see on people's wrists way more than I did 18 months ago.
finally. Thankfully
Yeah.
too, because I think the Engineer is cool. I mean, say what you want about the movement being a Baume and Mercier. It is what it is. That watch is really cool. You put it on, it is very comfortable. Is it a bit expensive? Absolutely. Are watches expensive? They absolutely are. It didn't stop me from putting the Ingenieur, the new 40 millimeter, the what is the gold with black dial in my top releases of the year. Because that watch, when I put it on, I mean, I felt like a baller. I was in the boutique just like jangling it on my wrist, and everyone's eyeball. I took the glove off. I took that white glove off, and I'm handling it, and everyone's looking at me like a madman. But that watch was so cool, and the full black ceramic was so cool. But the weird thing though is those were shown off at Watches and Wonders, and then nobody talked about them for the rest of the year because again, it was more of a flash in the pan moment. Especially my brother and I were actually talking about this because he's a fan of F1, and I think advertising is becoming a bit more important as more of a lasting staple in watches as people are trying to figure out how to level out that bell curve, right? Instead of having the flash in the pan, they're trying to figure out how to launch a watch and make that line more important so they don't have to keep launching limited edition after limited edition because that model is not sustainable. We've seen that with so many brands where, it can really build a brand up quickly, but it can also deflate a brand very quickly too. And we saw with the F1 movie, that movie came out and it was supposed to be a huge moment for the Ingenieur, but if you watch that movie, that vintage green dial Ingenieur, I mean, it shows up, but you really don't see it on Brad Pitt's wrist all that often. And I don't think it sold that watch as much as they were hoping it would.
No, I think the watch that got the most attention coming out of that movie was Carrie Condon's Mark 20 with the crown unscrewed for most of the movie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that doesn't really help you sell watches. It just kind of makes people chuckle a little bit, which doesn't I mean, it doesn't accomplish what you want it to.
Yeah. Of course, that being said, I did buy a Mark 20 this year, so I don't think it was because of the movie. It was just
No.
before the movie came out,
I
but I
I
still
mean,
did it.
I bought a Mark 18 and then sold it and bought it and I'm trying to sell it again. But, we're here we are at the end of the day where we both ended up with them. You know what? It is weird though. I think the flash in the pan of the Ingenieur put IWC back in my mind this past year and made that brand stick with me. And another brand that actually kind of had a big flash in the pan moment, but I think did a very good job of instead of falling right back off of that curve and keeping their line up was Breitling. I think they did a fantastic job of sparsing out their releases and keeping that hype level up a little bit and hooking me into the brand. It's a brand that I sort of paid attention to, but didn't really get all that interested in. I like their vintage models more than their more contemporary models. And now all of a sudden, I'm lusting after some modern Breitling models. And that is not something I expected to say going into 2025.
No, I think they did a great job. I mean, you look at their 2024 and their initial release of the football watches, of the NFL
Mhm.
collaboration watches, and we all kind of sat back and laughed at them a little bit because
Yeah.
they put the logos right on the dial. It felt a little bit like something you might get off a Fanatics site.
Yeah.
And then they followed it up with this year's NFL releases, and those watches were awesome.
I think they're pretty cool. Not I don't like the Endurance Pro because again, logo on the dial, and the Endurance Pro for me is like a bit of a it's a bit of a strange watch in general. I understand the purpose of it. I think it's kind of cool for what it is. But yeah, the Chronomat GMT with the logo on the back, but the color schemes on the front,
I
that's
mean,
pretty cool.
I'm a Patriots fan, so I'll say, I think red, blue, and white is a pretty good color scheme in general. But that watch is really tempting in a way I never would have expected. And part of it is that it's just a really good watch to begin with. And they've tied it in without beating you over the head with it this year.
Totally. Yeah, it was a bit more subtle with just it it's really strange because if you look at that watch and you don't care about football, you can still buy it, but now you can buy it in a whole bunch of different colors. But if you do care about football, hey, lucky you, you can turn the watch over and support your team. That's just a cool added bonus. And it's a watch that I actually saw. I posted it on my Instagram story several times, but I saw football players actually wearing it on the sidelines, which you don't always see. I think Breitling really pushed to make sure that people were seeing these watches in the wild a bit more than normal. And so I would see it on the wrist of not just active players, but former players. So, like Antonio Gates, Hall of Fame tight end, is sitting on the sidelines talking to a reporter wearing the Chronomat GMT. That is really cool. That is something that, again, I wasn't seeing from them before. And all of the sudden, I'm seeing it now. And that's Breitling. I don't think that that's organic. I think that's Breitling saying, hey, let's make sure that people are continuing to see our brand because maybe we can't, because again, of market trends, we can't push our stuff out over and over and over again. Let's just make sure that we're consistent throughout the year. Let's push our messaging, push our models, push our image all year long, and hopefully just sustain this level because next year we've got some big stuff. We've got Universal Genève coming, we've got Galley coming. We got to build this hype now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might be wrong in thinking not only is Gallery relaunching, I think it's also a pretty big anniversary year for that brand. So it's
Hmm.
all this stuff on the back burner. The group has expanded hugely. I've not seen one of the new Universal Genève watches in person yet, but everyone I've spoken to who has says they knocked it out of the park. And, you know, also don't be surprised when Breitling drops something with a Breitling name on it that's great.
Right. Right. And people who are into vintage Breitling, they're not as sketchy as they used to be. Sorry, they're not going to be. They're going to be a bit flashy. Omega is not the tool watch it used to be. It's a bit flashy and dressy. Like that is just modern tool watches. They're going to have a bit of polishing. I said it on somebody else's podcast at one point, I think, but I like a polished center link for the simple fact of if I'm sitting at a bar, I know if we're going to be friends if you have center polished links because if they're scuffed up, we can be friends. If they're still polished, chances are good we're not going to be friends. That is just, it's a good indicator if you actually use your tool watch or not. But yeah, Breitling did good, and we'll talk about anniversaries here in a little bit because we have a few brands that are celebrating a couple big
Yeah.
anniversaries coming up, and next year might be kind of wild. But overall, looking back at 2025, I just want to kind of get a temperature check from you, looking at collectors and enthusiasts separately, because I do think that
Mhm.
there's a bit of a divide between collectors and enthusiasts. You can be an enthusiast without being a collector. You can be a collector without being an enthusiast. And then there's obviously the people in the middle who do both. Where do you think people sit right now? Do you think people are, still feeling that fever that we felt 2 years ago where people were just buying and flipping and trading and all of that kind of stuff? Do you think it's cooled down? Do you think content is up? What's your finger on the pulse take right now?
I do think we're through that heat phase. Things are clearly calmer. You're seeing stuff sitting longer. You're seeing in boutiques and in pre-owned. I think it's good that you made a distinction between the collector and the enthusiast, because I think if you're a collector, you had a better year than if you were a generalist enthusiast. I think it was a really good year for collectors because I think a lot of brands kind of came back home and embraced specificity again, which is often what collectors look for. I think the price thing really hurt the enthusiast.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it
I
did.
think, you know, a lot of us do find ourselves somewhere in between those two realities, but I do think those are the two general frameworks for the year.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think 2025, maybe 2025 was more of a dividing year, whereas 2022, 2023 was more of a come together year. Maybe that's a cynical way of thinking about it, possibly, but if I look back on it, I do think last year was more of a catering to the limited edition crowd, the avant garde, the people who are looking for something a bit more unique. I mean, obviously, we talked about tariffs, but right before those tariffs were really imposed, we saw a huge uptick in high end watches shipping out. We saw a huge uptick in the vintage pre owned market, but on the higher end level. You're not selling you know, just calling it what it is. Right now, you see brands like Analog Shift who are very high in vintage pre-owned or crafted in Taylor. They're trying to make a huge push in vintage American-made watches, which are in their own right. They're very cool. People just don't know the history of them. They don't know the story of them, and they're trying to educate and sell because that's what they do. They're trying to make money, and there is a huge market for those if they can create the market. However, they're having a hard time creating that market because cheaper pre-owned watches didn't move the needle for anybody. Those just kind of sat there and they didn't do much of anything for anybody. So it was a good year for the high-end collector. It was a good year for the avant-garde collector. It was a good year for the exclusivity people. It was a bit off-putting for people who found themselves really trying to the meat and potatoes people, the people who are the Seiko diver people, the people who really want to like nerd out on the topic, who just want to sit around a fire and drink a whiskey and talk about how they beat up their turtle and how they're wearing their actual vintage Submariner or Planet Ocean or whatever to do the thing. um it was not the most enthusiast year that we have seen, but I do think that that is going to change in 2026 because I think a lot of brands in 2025 held stuff back because of the scared market. And I think 2026 is where they're going to start pushing it back out. And because of the anniversaries we're going to talk about, I think they're going to celebrate this upcoming year and really allow this to be the moment that they cater to the enthusiasts, because last year they maybe lost a little bit of ground in that space and they're realizing it. I think maybe they're realizing that the 1000 enthusiasts that really matter are more important than the one
Mhm.
high end collector or the 1 million tiny voices. The core 1000 are the most important, and last year maybe they lost a little bit of hold of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears here a little bit
Mhm.
and let's talk about content from last year. We talked at the top of the podcast. I introduced you as a fellow content creator and watch writer. I think that's fair to classify ourselves as content creators because I mean, that's the game now. You have to do more than just writing. You have to make posts, you have to shoot photo and video and make short reels and videos and all that kind of stuff. But I want to look back on this past year because I think a lot of the times when your head's down and you're pumping out content, you're just kind of producing and moving on to the next one. And very rarely do you look back and actually appreciate things that you did in the past. So I wanted to take this opportunity to look back on something that we did in the past and something that somebody else did in the past and just give it its flowers for
Mhm.
one moment. So, Griffin, I'm going to start with you. I just want to give you the opportunity to shout out one piece of content that you were proud of that you made last year that you hope somebody else goes back and takes a look at, or something that maybe you hope to carry forward into 2026 and maybe not replicate, but build off of in 2026. So go ahead. What were you proud of last year?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick just one, I did a lot of work I was proud of last year. I did a lot of work that I would never want to have to be faced by again.
That is an honest answer.
But I early in the year published a review of the Vertex M60 Aqualine ND,
You did. Yeah.
and that is a watch I've owned for a while. It's a watch I love. It's a watch I wear hard, and I genuinely think that my review of it is pretty much the definitive review of that watch out there. Um, and I say that not because it's necessarily perfectly written, but I think I'm the only person to review that watch after owning it for an extended period of time.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was a watch that had a real impact on me when I saw it, had a real impact on me when I bought it, but had a way bigger impact on me in owning it. It changed how I collect, it changed what I wear, it changed how I think about my own collection. And I think the review did a very good job of expressing that and expressing why that watch in particular did it. Um, and I thought the photos turned out well. Thought the watch looked great, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback about it. So it's the thing I definitely feel best about from last year.
For those of you who are just listening, I do encourage you to tune into the video of this podcast because there was a very smug smirk on Griffin's face the whole time he was talking about the photos there.
Yeah,
um,
slightly unavoidable.
no. I agree with you actually. So that review in particular, and for those listening, I did not know what Griffin was going to shout out for his piece of content. So this is not a prepared statement at all. But that review, I read your review of that, and I'll be honest, I don't read everything that you put out there because there's just not enough time.
Yeah,
Obviously
no.
there's just not. But that one in particular, I read it. I started hunting for one of those watches because at the time, and I still really want to put a Pelagos in my collection. I love the Pelagos. I love the LHD in particular, but the FXD in black is something that when I handled it before its launch for a review that I was writing, I don't know if I was scripting that for, I don't know, whenever that was coming out. But that watch stuck with me and I really love it. Well, looking at the Vertex, I was like, man, he might be right. This might be like a definitive tool watch that beats a lot of other tool watches for double the price point of this watch. And so I started hunting for one of my own just to add it to the collection, to try it out, to really live with it for a little while and see if I would like it as much as you did. And I will tell you, finding a pre owned example of that watch is almost impossible unless it is almost the same price as brand new or very beat up or both. Some people have beat it to shreds and are still selling it for almost MSRP, which tells you how much people value that watch. People still love that watch. People think very highly of that watch. And ultimately, while I was hunting for it, I bought like five other watches and never ended up buying that watch at all. But it is still one that is on my short list and one that anytime I see it in the wild, I get very
Mhm.
excited about it. And when I was at British Watchmakers Day, I visited the Vertex booth and was hanging out with it and handling it and playing with it and played with it in blue. And it's just, man, that thing feels solid in hand. And your review was great. So yeah, I agree. That thing was it was very well written, very well photographed, and it's always good to hear from an owner rather than someone who just spent a week with it. Um, an experienced person who spends a week with the watch can write a review, but that there's no replacement for an owner's review, someone who is experienced in watches who then owns a watch for a period of time. there's no replacement for that.
Yeah. And I mean, those are the reviews I look for when I'm thinking about buying a watch because you're right. We can't keep up with everything. I don't read every
Mhm.
review you write. I don't read every review a lot of my friends write.
How dare you?
But when I look for a review, I do tend to seek out those kind of long-term owners review style pieces.
Yeah.
Um,
They just mean more. You're putting more of your soul into that piece than you would something you just banged out because it's a new release that came out. It's just a bit more of you on the page.
and
In this,
so what's your personal favorite piece of content?
so it's in a
Turning the
similar
tables.
vein. Yeah, it's in a similar vein, but it's actually not a review at all, and it's actually partially about watches, but partially not about watches. So this is a piece that I published on Worn and Wound called "Gears and Gaskets: Spotting Mechanical Icons on Wrist and Road at Lime Rock Historic Festival 43." This is a piece that I published back in September. It was about Labor Day weekend's Lime Rock 43rd Historic Festival, which is where they take vintage race cars, and for the entire weekend around Labor Day, they race them around track. And it's not posh racing, right? This is, guys who are breaking these cars, going down into the paddock and fixing them themselves. They are throwing them around track. There are a couple crashes of very expensive cars. I can't remember if it was a Dino. I don't know. There was a Ferrari that we
Yeah.
saw crash out that I saw it and I about threw up in the grass. It was incredible. It was so fun to watch. There were a couple other people from the watch community who were there who I ran into and hung out with quite a bit and had a great time with them. But this article that I wrote was part car spotting, part watch spotting. And if I'm being honest, the article, I had to wrap it up in about one third of the amount of words that I actually wanted to write because I started writing and got all starry eyed and
Mhm.
just kind of, I don't know, started going off way off script and had such a good time at this event that I could have written this thing for days and had a really fun time. But there's one part in this article that I really want to call attention to. And it's when I'm talking about a vintage Breitling on the wrist of a man named James Alder. He was a race car driver and also a mechanic that I met working on his own Jaguar. He was literally laying underneath his vintage Jag, wearing a Jag mechanic's coat and denim jeans and a Jag mechanic driver's cap. And he's laying on the ground covered in grease working on this car. And I just see this little piece of gold flashing on his wrist. And I'm like, I have to sneak up there and see what this is. And of course, it's this old Breitling Premier chronograph. And it just, man, that stuck with me. It's something that blew my mind. And I walked up, I asked if I could take a photo of it. And all of a sudden, James and I are in this conversation for half an hour. And the whole time he's tinkering away. He's changing parts on the car. He is, fixing the thing, trying to get it ready to race because he wants to race this car. And ultimately, he didn't. He didn't get it fixed up. He couldn't get it out on track in time. And the whole thing just kind of fell apart on him. But he drives this car to track to race it. He drives down the road. He beats the snot out of it. He wears period correct clothing and he wears this vintage Breitling because it is what he thought a vintage Jaguar race car driver would wear. And boy, did it fit the part. And this story just, it's everything, right? It's everything that we're in this hobby for. It's romance. It's this guy gets it. He's not a watch collector, but boy, is he a watch nerd. And he gets everything. He's got the vintage look. He's got the vintage knowledge. He's got just the charisma. And I mean, you can probably tell I'm swelling up
Yeah.
talking about it right now. My chest is getting all full and I'm getting all excited and fluttery. The story might not tell the whole story, but I think when you read between the lines on this post, you can kind of get what I'm getting after here. It was a special piece to put together, and I will be back at Historic Festivals 44 Labor Day weekend. If you're going out there, hit me up. We can hang out a little bit and do some more wrist spotting, do some more car spotting, hang out in the paddock, watch some Porsches get crashed, watch a little Mini Cooper fight its way to the front of the pack. It is such a fun time. If you're going out there, hit me up. But yeah, this article in particular is the thing that I'm most proud of, even though it's an article I probably should have never written. So that was a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we wound up texting through most of that weekend because you
Mhm.
had told me I should come. I
Yeah.
didn't come. I was an idiot. And you just kept texting me saying, "Oh my God, there's this great watch, this is a great car, this is awesome, the energy's amazing.
Hmm.
And I think that really shows through in the piece. Um,
Thank you.
you were so clearly excited. Um, and I think you captured a real core of what that experience is. You'll just have to write 3 times as much next year.
I will. I mean, I will for this upcoming Labor Day, I will write an uncapped article. So this is one where I'll write a daily report.
Hmm.
I'll be a little less shy this time because this one, I'll be honest, like I went out there, I was a little shy this time. I was out there with my camera. I didn't know the vibe of the track. I didn't know how forthcoming people were going to be with a camera around them. You know, this is a very guarded community. It's a very tight knit community where people are very car focused. They're not watch focused. So when you walk up and you're like, "Hey, can I take a photo of your watch?" They're like, "Don't you want to shoot my car? Like, what are you doing here?" So it's a little bit of a weird conversation at first. But this year when I go down there, I'll be there for all 3 days. I'm going to shoot photos all 3 days. I'm going to write something all 3 days. I saw a vintage tag Formula One too, which just like got me all excited. The guy was super excited to show it off. Anyway, yeah, it was. There's going to be more to come, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, that was a piece that I produced. We talked about a piece you produced,
Hmm.
but I also want to give flowers to our contemporaries out in the industry because, you know, our colleagues, our competitors, whatever you want to call them, we shake hands across the industry. We are friends behind the scenes, even though we might, you know, also jab at people behind the scenes too. But I want to lay flowers at the feet of people who we might not spend our days with. So, Griffin, is there a piece of content from one of our contemporaries that you want to throw some praise at that other people should go check out?
Absolutely. So this is going to be a piece from Hodinkee that was written and photographed by our friend Tantan Wang,
Hmm.
who is one of the most joyous people in this industry. If
Yes,
you
he
ever
is.
get a chance to spend any amount of time with him, especially if he's picking the restaurant, do it. But this was a piece he wrote this fall called In Depth: The Engineering Behind Apple's 3D Printed Watch Cases. And I know a lot of people will be like, "Ugh, it's about an Apple Watch. I don't want to read it." This is unbelievably cool. That's the easiest way to describe it. Tantan got a level of access to Apple's manufacturing that blew me away and did a great job of investigating what is a fundamental change in how we approach watchmaking.
Hmm.
It just happens to be coming from a tech company instead of a watch company. And even that's a little uncharitable because I think it's time to admit that Apple actually is a pretty big watch company, even if we
Totally.
don't like it.
Well, and a lot of watch companies are tech companies. So, you know, you
Yeah.
can flip that all around.
But even if you just flip through the photography of this story, this is 3D printing on a scale unfathomable a decade ago.
Yeah.
And that Apple has committed to making the most, the best selling watch in the world, making it with a 3D printed case is astounding. And it tells us a lot about where we're heading, both in the wearable space, the manufacturing space, and in the watch world. I mean, we've talked about it. I have a 3D printed watch sitting on my desk in for review right now. It's a real moment of change for all of us, and this story
Hmm.
captured it perfectly.
I think what's really interesting about it too is yeah, I mean, you talk about the access that Tantan had for this. I think the fact that it's not just photography, but he also has like CAD
Hmm.
animations and little gifs and videos in here too. His writing on the piece is also compelling too. He writes in a way that he's not talking down to the piece. He's talking about the impact that the Apple Watch has had and like the impact the technology and the advancements in technology has had on the Apple Watch and the industry in general. And I actually just scrolled down to the bottom. The fact that this piece has 6 comments is criminal. This is
Yeah.
insane. This is a masterclass in content here from Tantan. Again, from one of the sweetest guys in the industry, a guy who you and I have spent a decent amount of time with. Please, people, go check this out because it's awesome. If you hate the Apple Watch, if you love the Apple Watch, this is still something that you should go and check out because I think it will give you a peek behind the curtain. And as Griffin, you just mentioned, 3D printing is coming to the watch world, whether you like it or not. I talked a lot last year about the Holthenrich Lab Series 1.24. That is a 3D printed case, and that thing made me drool all over its curved lugs. So I think it's time to embrace modern technology and realize that 3D printing is here to stay. It's not going away. High end watches, low end watches, they're going to use 3D printing going forward because that is just the manufacturing process. And this is a peek behind the curtain as to how it's going to be going for a lot of brands. It's pretty cool. Yeah, what a piece. Good recommendation there. Obviously, we'll have these links in the show notes too for everybody who wants to go and check all of this stuff out. Cool. My piece of content is actually from another big editor out there, Nacho over at Fratello.
Mm,
He's been producing a lot of stuff. My favorite thing about Nacho is that he is a money where your mouth is kind of a guy. He is a tool watch aficionado, and he is somebody who uses them, beats them up, and puts them through their paces, much like I try to do, except Nacho does more than I ever could because people in Europe live lives more than people in America. Just saying that. Also a lover of, neo vintage Omegas. So little shout out there to Nacho. But Nacho put together recently in December a photo report of Tudor Nazar's Big Wave Challenge in 2025.
mm,
This is a very fun article where Nacho went out and shot a big wave competition sponsored by Tudor. The photography is awesome. The writing is a whole lot of fun. And really, the reason why I want to shout this out is because recently over the holiday break, I came down with an illness and was not feeling great. And I missed this piece when it came out live. And I was scrolling through just looking for something to, you know, take up time,
mhm,
fill the void, inspire me a little bit, make me feel better, get me out of bed a little bit. And I opened up this article and the photography made me want to go outside even though it was 15 degrees and wet because it's beautiful. And it's again the Tudor FXD, which is a watch that I just talked about loving. Nacho is again out there just kind of in the elements, taking it on the face. You see him in the wetsuit and you see him with the camera in hand and he's got the life vest on and he's getting ready to go out there and be in the water and he's not afraid to do it, where I think a lot of other editors in this space are very much sit behind the computer and type away. Nacho's in the field again putting his money where the mouth is, and I love this about him, and I think this article shows a side of him that he doesn't get to put into a lot of his work, and I think that his passion for this type of content comes out in this piece in particular. So not only is it a really cool piece of content, but it's a really cool peek behind the curtain to who the person is. So I think it's one to check out. Have you seen this article yet,
I
Griffin?
did. It was a great piece. I thought it actually did a maybe a better job of capturing what modern Tudor is
Hmm.
than most other things I've seen about Tudor in the last year or so. It really got to the heart of it. In particular, there was a wrist shot of a woman wearing the Tudor Black Bay 54 Lagoon Blue
Yeah, I
right in
was
the
just
middle
gonna
of a
bring this up.
bunch of shots of Pelagoses, Pelagi. Uh,
Yeah, Pella guy.
and it there was something about it, the way it was sequenced, it just totally captured what that brand has become,
Hmm.
which is the watch. Like, it is the answer to, if you're just going to wear a watch, Tudor has really taken that crown in a lot of ways from a brand like Rolex.
Hmm.
It makes total sense that at one event you would have FXDs strapped over wetsuits and this beautiful, what I will admit was kind of one of the surprise hits of the year for me in the Tudor Black Bay 54, um, Lagoon Blue, which is a name that keeps escaping my. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is a great piece. I think Nacho did a great job. I love how I've never met him, I've never spoken to him directly, but I love how much he communicates with people and how much he responds. And I love how open he is. And this is a great piece.
Yeah, it's very cool. And it's funny you call that out. I was actually going to call it out too for people who are watching the video stream of this podcast on, we're launching this on Monday. On Tuesday, the video comes out and you can watch this. I'll put it up in the video, but it says popular with the ladies, the Black Bay 54 blue or Lagoon blue. It's very funny to put that little caption underneath there. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of people here organically wearing Tudor. which I think is very telling of the event. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all product placement, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of people, photographers and athletes, and people who were just genuinely there to spectate and participate, but also wearing the tool watch, the shield on the wrist, ready to go out there and battle these giant waves. So very fun, very cool piece of content. Yeah, I don't know, one that I really enjoyed and one that got me through a cold winter week where I was not feeling my best. So Nacho, thank you for that one. One last thing here that I want to call out, talk about favorite pieces. We're gonna now jump into new year watch look ahead, I guess.
Mhm.
I talked about content from last year. Let's go ahead and jump into next year. You talked about, the Blue Lagoon being your favorite, or a surprise hit, I guess you said, from last year. Before we jump into the new watches, very quickly, what was your favorite new release from last year?
Nomos Club Sport World Timer.
That was
uh,
your
In
favorite out of all watches.
it, it really was for a few reasons.
Give me
One,
a top
it's
three so I'm not mad at you. Give me a top
okay.
three.
It's that. It's the Denison ALD dual time.
Okay, yep, give me a third.
And it's the Berneron Quantium Annuel.
Wow, okay.
And if I had to
Wow.
give you a fourth, it would be the Roger Smith Series 6, because that thing's just it basically doesn't exist, but it's so cool, and I
You
love everything Roger Smith does.
eclectic man. All right, sorry. Go ahead and walk me through the world timer. You were giving me some points before I rudely cut you off.
First off, I think fundamentally,
Mhm.
the best GMTs. I don't need a GMT in a crazy sports watch. I just
Mhm.
don't.
Sure.
When I'm traveling and need to know what time zone it is in multiple time zones, I'm traveling for work. I need a watch I can wear for work. This does that great. It's a great functionality. It looks awesome. Um, James Stacy from Hodinkee has his on this great beads of rice bracelet, and I just every time I see a picture of it, I covet it. They've done a bunch of limited editions of it over the year, and I've liked almost every one of them. But the thing that got me the most excited about this watch was Nomos, which is a brand whose price has been creeping up,
Yeah.
took a complication they've had for a long time, improved the movement, made it more robust, made it thinner, put it in a more palatable case for more people, and made it $1,000 cheaper.
Hmm.
And I
I mean,
think that
fair.
is incredibly cool of the brand to do. On top of the fact that it's just an awesome watch that I wouldn't be surprised if there's one on my wrist by the end of 2026.
Wow. That's that's a bold statement. Okay. Fair. You defended that properly. That's fair. I think for me, it was such a hyped piece from 2025 that as 2025 went on, I just kind of fell out of love of it. When I saw the first press release of it, I actually liked it. I was impressed with the movement and impressed with the technology behind it, but the styling just never did it for me. And so as people fell more in love with it, I fell more out of love with it.
Yeah.
And that is just kind of what happened. I kind of split away from it because of that. But
Yeah. And
I get it.
and to offer critique, I think, the two standard catalog versions of it, the blue and the silver dial, both
Hmm.
sunburst, are the worst version of the watch. And I think that is a
Yeah.
fundamental problem.
Yeah.
If the versions of the watch we all want are the ones that are only being produced in batches of 150 or 200, that is a problem.
To be fair, though, do you really think they're going to sell more than, I mean, what? They've produced 15 limited editions to this point? Maybe not that many. I don't know. There's a decent amount of
It's
limited
about that.
editions, but then you multiply that by 150. Do you really think that they're going to sell more than that amount? Because I don't. I feel like that's a healthy amount for that model to sell. So I think limiting it to 150 per color is actually probably just making sure that they're not overproducing.
There's probably something to be said for that. I guess what my frustration is the couple specific colors I really wanted sold out before I could get one.
Yeah, that is 100% fair because there are a few that were standouts for sure.
Yeah,
So,
and in the end, the one they released in December, the kind of sandy dune colorway, which I can't remember the specific name of, that
mhm.
wound up being my favorite one, and it was the last one they released of the year.
Hmm,
Um,
interesting. The
but
Night Tracer models, I think, whatever
mhm.
the cityscape ones, those ones are pretty cool too. The cockpit views, those are cool. Interesting. Well, my 3-2-1, I did a whole video on this, but my 3-2-1 were Breitling Top Time B31. Fight me in the comments section. Just drop dead erotic dial on that one. Tudor Pelagos Ultra, which people seem to have forgotten about. I don't really understand why, but like that watch blew me away last year and still continues to. And then number one, JLC Tribute Monoface Reverso on that Milanese bracelet. The watch is
Yeah.
stunning. The bracelet is mind blowing. And every time I go into the boutique, I put it on, I wear it, I cry a little bit, and then I go home. It is just easy to pick for the number one. Will I ever own one? No. But if I ever had to, if I could like sell one of my legs and get a healthy profit back, I might for that watch. It's pretty darn good.
Yeah. And with how heavy that watch is, the weight would wind up being about the same.
I got some thunder thighs, man. I don't know if I'm
But
pulling that off. Yeah, it would be interesting. But I did see too when I was at the boutique. I don't think I'm supposed to talk about this, but you can engrave the case back on those
mhm,
and actually get enamel work done
yeah.
in the engraving. And so I saw someone get like a custom engraving with red enamel of like I think it was their wedding invitation. So it was like their
Yeah.
wedding watch that they bought, and it was beautiful, so cool. And then they got it on a leather strap, which I wanted to, just reach through time and just kind of shake them a little bit. But,
Yeah.
to each
I
their
mean,
own.
that was an unbelievable watch. I think that may be the watch of the year that when I saw it, it had the most immediate impact.
Hmm.
It just, you put it on in person. It was like, this is a watch that is exactly what it should be. It knows what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be higher on my personal list if it were in yellow gold. Um, but I think this is an absolute home run for JLC. I think JLC had a really strong year. I think they had a lot
They
of
did.
great interest, and that isn't, you know, I can't argue against that being your pick,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the
even though
thing
you're
is like
wrong.
it's so fair. All right. Well, let's transition from there because I'm actually going to use that pick to talk about our next topic here, which is basically 2026 new industry trends, brand predictions, and what we think the landscape of watches is going to look like going forward. So, specifically looking at the JLC Tribute Monoface Reverso Mesh Milanese bracelet, I am willing to bet that that beautiful pink gold turns into a steel version next year. I think we might see a steel mesh Milanese bracelet next year. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong,
Be a
but I
hell of a
hope so.
watch.
I know, right? But that's my prediction for one specific watch. But I'd love to talk about predictions and new industry trends for the entire industry as a whole. Is there one that you want to kind of start with?
Um, well, my hope for next year, and I touched on this a little earlier, is that we see brands getting a little more specific. I think the idea that every brand needs to be all things for all people is one we're ready to move past. I don't need to be able to walk into any watch boutique and get a watch to scratch any itch. I
Hmm.
want to walk into a boutique and see the watch that only that brand could have made. And I think we started to see some of that this year. I'd like to see that double down on. I don't want to see us backslide from that.
Is there a brand you want to call out specifically? I would love it if you did.
Um, oh, who's doing it wrong? It's
Hmm.
Omega. I mean, Omega is the
Ooh, all right.
quintessential example of that.
Interesting.
They, and it makes sense for their scale, but they are a brand that is looking to have a watch that scratches every itch. You walk into an Omega boutique today and it's overwhelming. If you don't know exactly what you want, I don't know how you would ever pick. And, that is a brand that kind of lives up to that. I mean, that is a brand you're going to find them in airports, you're going to find them in malls, you're going to find them at high end jewelry stores. So it maybe more than anyone else, they do have an onus to be all things to all people.
Hmm.
But we're talking about a brand that has a company that has a real portfolio of brands. And Omega doesn't need to be that. They can have Blancpain and Breguet and Longines and let Omega get a little more specific. I actually, mm, I may be in the minority on this. I think the new Planet Ocean was a hugely successful watch in its execution. Do I have questions about the price? Obviously, almost $10,000 for that watch is hard to stomach. But when I pick it up, it doesn't not feel like a $10,000 watch.
Yeah. Well, hey,
You
you
know,
know what? Nobody talked about the power reserve. So
yeah,
they did a good job distracting on that one.
um, true. And that's a watch. Talk about specific predictions. We're going to see more Planet Oceans this year. It
Mhm.
wouldn't surprise me. My immediate reaction when I saw that watch was that is a case that is designed to look great in ceramic and titanium.
You did say that. Yeah, I remember specifically talking to you about that.
And so don't be surprised when you see a 45 millimeter titanium Planet Ocean chronograph. And don't be
Mhm.
surprised when you see a 39 millimeter ceramic Planet Ocean dive watch. I think we're going to see that as a watch that's going to be iterated on to no end. Does that also mean that Omega needs to iterate heavily on the DeVille Trésor? Probably
Mm.
not.
Yeah.
They can
I mean,
focus in a bit.
they're going to iterate on the Railmaster. We're going to see more Railmasters. We're going to see more of the adventure style Aquaterras where they have the new bezels and grading color schemes. Where I think I think you're right. I would hope for less is
Mhm.
more from a lot of brands. I just don't know if we're going to get that. I think
I don't think we're going to get it from the big brands, but I do
no.
think a brand that's been doing this really well is Zenith.
Sure.
Zenith makes a
Sure.
watch and it's clearly a Zenith.
Yeah.
And, you know, sure, talk about some Chronomasters and maybe people will make comparisons to the Daytona that I understand but don't totally agree with. But, you know, Zenith released dive watches for the first time 2 years ago almost. And those are unabashedly Zenith dive watches.
And they're
They are,
pretty cool.
they're pretty cool and they're pretty divisive. A lot of people don't like them.
Yeah, I don't love them, but I think they're awesome.
Yeah. And I
So,
don't think that's a problem. I think
no.
that's actually really great. And so
Yeah, people
I'd
should
like to see
hate
more
them.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. I think that Zenith has done a very good job of that. Actually, so much so they've really leaned into their design language that when
Hmm.
the Planet Ocean came out, I sat there and I went, "Oh, that rubber strap is a Defy rubber strap." So,
Absolutely.
like, it's just kind of interesting that you call that out in particular. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, as far as trends go, though, I think we are going to see some bigger brands. We talk about Christopher Ward as a micro brand. They're not a micro brand, they're a big brand now. They are a brand that is actively trying to scale down a little bit and trying to refine their catalog. So there are some of those bigger brands that have realized less is more in terms of stuff like that. So you might see some brands starting to thin the water, so to speak, which will be good for them. It will help them refine their catalog and really help their audiences choose what's best for them. uh, I think you're going to see the same trends continue though into 2026, partially because releases from 2025 got pushed into
Hmm.
2026, but also some people were late to the party. So, your integrated bracelets, those aren't slowing down. Stone dials are here to stay, unfortunately. We're going to see, I think skeleton dials are going to pop off in
Hmm.
2026. I think skeleton dials, for whatever reason, are going to blow up. And then precious metals are are gonna be the hot
Oh,
topic in
absolutely.
2026. I mean, pink gold really reared its head back in 2025. We saw pink gold all over the place instead of rose gold,
Hmm.
because how dare you
Yeah.
say rose gold? Um, I think we're gonna see some new golds. I mean, we saw Alanga do more honey gold than we
Hmm.
have in the past, and so I think we're gonna see other brands not necessarily develop their own gold because that's incredibly expensive, but I think maybe experiment with metals. And I really hope
Yeah.
we see more 925 silver come out because
That would be great.
that's still a pretty underutilized precious.
And I mean, there's rumors floating around of a new Tridor Rolex, which would be very cool to see them bring that back into the fold.
It would
Those,
be, unless it's the GMT Master 2 Coke. Please don't do that.
but vintage Tridor day dates and Datejusts are very cool watches. They're
Hmm.
very weird watches. They're hard to wear, but there's a place for them. I think you're absolutely right. The Cartier has long had their Trinity pieces, which have three. Three golds mixed together, or interlocked. They've not done that much with watches. We've seen a little bit of it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more experimentation with that at Cartier. And I think we often talk about color predictions. Omos has had a huge amount of success over the last 2 years since they did that 32 piece limited edition set
Yeah,
in 2024 with
man,
these kind
yeah.
of matte, slightly less saturated colors. And then last year, we saw Rolex integrate some colors like that into their Oyster Perpetual lineup.
Mhm.
It wouldn't be a surprise to me if we see more of that kind of coloring trickling out through other brands. Breitling does it well with kind of their pistachio green, but I
Beautiful.
I could absolutely see that being the color direction for at least a year or two instead
Yeah.
of some of these sunburst vibrant colors that we've been experiencing a lot of over the last few years.
See, it's inelegant, so you probably won't see high-end luxury brands do this. But the new colors that we see on the two Prevail watches, there's that like neon orange and vibrant tealish blue that they put out on their watch. They're almost like cyberpunk colors that we saw.
Yeah.
First of all, I love the two colors. I think they are beautiful and stunning as I'm a wind up and I raved about them to his face. And then I'm seeing them on Instagram and I'm still just like drooling over them. I think the colors are cool. I actually think we're going to see those colors start to appear in mid to lower tier brands because everyone is doing those pastel and
Yeah.
kind of vibrant mattes and lacquers and stuff like that. But those kind of poppy neon colors are still a little bit untouched, and what a way to stand out. I mean, could you imagine I'm not a big fan of, like, steampunk visuals, but could you
Yeah.
imagine having a Tudor Pelagos with, you know, that teal dial, from the Prevail, like a full dial in that teal, or like a vibrant orange Tudor Pelagos
Yeah.
would be pretty cool. Um, I
Yeah.
don't
I
know,
think,
I'm hoping.
yeah. I mean, I think as one of us is going to be right. So,
It's not me. I'm telling you right now. That might be my prediction might be 2027 or 2028 because those colors are just starting to appear now in micro brand watches. And as we've seen with old industry trends, those might appear in micro brand or high end brands. And then 3 or 4 years later, they appear in like the mid to luxury tier brands. So we're still probably too early for that to happen. But boy, would I love it if I was wrong. I would love it if we saw like an Oyster Perpetual come out with a neon yellow. That would just be crazy. It would be, I mean, we saw puzzle pieces, we saw bubbles. So you never know.
they've pushed it.
They have
Uh,
pushed it.
and
And
then slightly shifting, are there any complications you'd like to see executed on differently this year?
no, I, okay. So you talked about refinement.
Yeah.
I am kind of getting sick of brands shoving complications into certain pieces. I think that there has been a shift of people who are like, we have to have a complication in our collection. We've got to do it. You know, we're a micro brand. We have to have a chronograph. So now we've got to have a VK64 in our collection. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to do that. If you can't execute it properly, just move away from it. That's okay. If you have a pure passion for it and you want to push for it, awesome. That is great. If you can't, just make an awesome bezel. Focus on
Yeah.
making your bezel better. Because if you put out a mushy bezel and a VK64 chronograph, I'm not paying attention to you. I'm moving on. So just do the smaller things better. That being said, yeah, obviously there are cool complications that are still out there that I would love to see. Like, I would love it if IWC just came out of nowhere and did like another depth gauge and just pushed it out and was like, hey, guess what? We've got some weird stuff coming out, and here's another depth gauge that we haven't done in a little while, and we want to show it off, or Oris for that matter. Um, you know, weird altimeters, or I don't know, a different way to do a compass. I'm just looking for ingenuity rather than refinement. Yeah, it's just the complications that we're seeing right now, a lot of them, again, in the mid to lower end, feel a little bit more slapped in because they want to fill their catalog more so than thoughtfully placed. But I'm saying this, and you look at Christopher Ward, and then you're like, okay, well, you know what? I guess maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people are thoughtfully developing new things, but yeah, heck, I mean, chiming watches in general. The Vulcane Cricket has been like the best entry point to an alarm watch for a while. If you can get me a $2,000 alarm watch that sits at
Yeah.
40 millimeters and is a little bit more tool oriented, sign me up. I love alarm watches. The Memovox is something that I lust after still. Like I think that watch is incredible. Um, yeah, give me a new like tool oriented alarm wristwatch. Maybe an alarm diver for no reason. That wouldn't work well. But I don't know.
That'd be great.
Something out there. What about I don't know. Complications for you?
I've been saying this for ages. I don't understand why there's not, we've seen Flyer GMTs all of a sudden totally available thanks to
Mhm.
Miyota and Swatch Group at under $1,000. I don't understand why there's not a really great integrated chronograph movement available at around the same price point. Basically right now, if you're looking at a mechanical chronograph under $2,000, you're looking at a Siegel or similar hand wound movement that is fine, not great, will keep okay time, will last an okay amount of time before you need intervention,
Intervention.
or you're or you're looking at a module. And I just it's beyond me why there's not a great, doesn't need to have extra stuff, but just a great running automatic chronograph movement. And I don't know that this will be the year for it, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, movement technology, I guess, is not really being innovated on like it used to be, unfortunately. And it's well, we just saw LVMH buy stake in Lejeune Perret, and so the game right now is really how can we source movements for our watches rather than how can we innovate on movements, which is unfortunate. So that is a bit of a shame. But I think you're right. For me, like I just kind of mentioned, I want more refinement than I want adding to anything. The things that have really been standing out to me that have been really impressing me have been you talked about the Miyota 9075. When Trafford took the GMT hand off and put the hour hand on the GMT, and now all of a
Great.
sudden we had a local jumping hour. Thank you. That
Yeah.
was awesome. Do more stuff like that. Be clever. When Clemens did a 200-meter diver and then made the case much thinner and more refined than other divers on the market, and was it VPH just came out with an under 10
VPC.
millimeter VPCs? Thank you.
Yeah.
Under 10 millimeter thick 200-meter diver. Like, come on, let's refine everything and make it amazing. And
Mhm.
then let's go back and start refining complications to fit those watches. Because at the end of the day, I don't want a 45 millimeter by 18 millimeter thick monstrosity on there just so I can play roulette every once in a while with Neymar on a plane. I want something that is refined first and then complicated. That's my two
Absolutely.
cents. But, hopefully people agree with me. They probably don't, but that's okay. That's why I'm talking on camera, so I can just spout off my nonsense.
And let us know if you totally disagree with us. It's always fun to argue.
I hope you do. I would love to argue with someone on these points. That's kind of the whole point of this is that we want to fight people, and why we have the microphones and you don't, so we can just say whatever we want. Speaking on other brands though, too, we talked about refinement and things coming up and changes in dimensions and stuff like that. We also talked earlier about anniversaries. So the
Yeah.
one thing I want to touch on kind of quickly here is that we have some big anniversaries coming up. We have the You Listenered on Freak anniversary coming up. We have Tudor's anniversary coming up. We have a bunch of anniversaries this year where people are celebrating their anniversaries. And as we saw last year too, Vacheron celebrated its 270th anniversary. So you can kind of pick a year and celebrate, I guess, if you want to. But this year in particular are some big anniversaries. I mean, Tudor turning the 100th anniversary is a big deal. So do you think that there are any of these brands that are going to really pop off and explode, or do you think it's going to be, we'll have an anniversary piece but status quo as per usual?
I think there's absolutely a couple that are going to happen. It's the 50th anniversary of the Nautilus.
Mhm.
Wouldn't surprise me if we finally see a 5811 in steel,
Mm.
which has
Ooh.
been something that's missing from their catalog for the last few years.
Mhm.
Um, it's
You wanna
also
put a
the 30.
JLC 920 in there? Just go just go for it.
It'd be great. Do it. Um, and for the love of God, put single sided screws back into the Nautilus bracelet.
Mm,
Uh, it's the 30th anniversary of the annual calendar, which
okay.
is maybe my favorite paddock complication. Uh, and I think they'll probably do something with that.
They for sure will. It'll be
Um,
precious and very limited, and you'll see a render, and it'll
yeah,
go away. Ben Clymer will have it.
yeah, and hopefully it's awesome, and that'll
Yeah,
be enough.
yeah.
Everyone's going to talk about Tudor. I It's my contention that this shouldn't actually count as Tudor's 100th anniversary.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, he trademarked the name in 1926. Uh, the first Tudor watches, which were third-party watches that he licensed the name to, came out in the early 30s, and it was another couple years before Hans Wilsdorf actually made a Tudor watch. I think we're slightly jumping the gun.
That is an interesting point. I was wondering okay, the whole thing with, like, the whole Zodiac diver thing that happened, was it 2 years ago when everyone was debating Blancpain or Zodiac or, who's making the first dive watch, and everyone was digging through archives and fighting over that. That argument has not happened with Tudor online that I have seen.
Yeah,
People are just
and
accepting 100 years.
yeah, maybe I need to write the piece and get it going, but
Put it on the Substack. You should do
yeah.
it. Get the argument started.
Um, but I think the anniversary I'm most excited for this year is this is the 30th anniversary of Chopard's LUC watchmaking.
Yeah, I think they're going to show out quite a
Yeah,
bit for that watch.
they had an incredible. Uh, the new Quattro is one of the best watches of 2025. It was what I picked as my favorite watch of Watches and Wonders,
Mhm.
and I think they're gonna kill it again this year. And now they've got something to tie it to and a way to tell the story. And I think one of the challenges they've had is communicating what LUC means, especially because you can get an LUC watch for under $20,000 and you can get an LUC watch for just under $1 million.
Mhm.
I think this will be a real chance for them to do some brand storytelling and communicate what LUC means and how far it's come in the last 30 years.
Yeah. What I want them to do, Chopard, if you are listening, and I know you're not, go out there, get Banu Chopra, or get Balil Kam. Get Balil, call him up right now. That man loves that watch more than anyone else I know. Call him, sign him to a year retainer, even though I know he has a full time job. Don't worry about that. Sign him to a 1 year retainer as your chief storyteller, and let him just tell the story of luck. Let him go out there and just spout it from the rooftops, because there is something special there, but it has been kind of a quiet killer for the last couple of years. People who know, they know about that watch. They like that watch a lot. They tell other people about it, but people who don't know about it, they just are like, it's Chopard. Who, like, they make jewelry. What? Why am I paying attention to it? And they move on. And it's a shame, because there is something really special going on there, and this is the year where they really need to lead with storytelling rather than, they're going to lead with watchmaking. That is what they're going to do, and it's going to be impressive. But the storytelling needs to equal the watchmaking this year, and that is something that I think they've really struggled with up until this point. And it can't be a point of struggle this year. This year it needs to match it.
Absolutely. And there's an old adage that the the real news, the most important news isn't what makes the front page, it's what reporters go and talk about in the bar across from work at the end of the day. And Chopard has kind of been that brand. It's the brand we all talk to each other about and don't necessarily do enough to write about. So, I mean, it's a little bit on us. It's a brand I definitely want to focus on more in 2026.
Yeah. Well, it's
And I
hard
think,
because for every one of those articles, you have to write 5 Rolex and 3 Tudor and 3
yeah,
Omega. And, it's tough. Because they have to lead the charge on storytelling. They have to get the enthusiast community to care in order to allow us to publish the pieces that we want to write about them. So it's half on us, half on them. It's not at all on the community. It's not the community's fault for not knowing their story. It's the fact that it's just not being told. So hopefully this is the year. Uh, before we move on from kind of the anniversaries, because I do think to predict what brands are going to do for their anniversaries is going to be very difficult. I personally think that You Listener Don is going to go nuts with the freak this year. But I mean, they get a little freaky with their freak that, we're going to see Mark II dials all over the place. I very quickly want to come up with a couple predictions for Tudor specifically, because you might contest the 100-year anniversary, other people might contest it, but I don't think they're going to. Is there one thing that you think that is a lock for their anniversary this year? One thing that you'd bet the farm on them doing?
Yeah, it's a big block chronograph. It's
Oh,
we saw them do that movement at Only Watch a few years ago. I
hmm
think we've all been expecting a new chronograph from them in that framework, and it hasn't come. So if I had to guess, and I mean, let's be honest, guessing at anything Rolex and Tudor are going to do is a fool's errand. But it would be that it's that chronograph, it's that or revived format. We've been seeing even on their socials, they're showing off 90s Tudor chronographs a little bit more.
hmm
Um, that feels like priming the pump.
yeah. See, I think it's going to be certified pre-owned. um, no, yeah. Well, it's tough, right? Because they're probably going to do. There's going to be some sort of precious metal anniversary piece, I assume. I think if they were smart, wouldn't it be amazing if they did like a Tudor sub? If they just pulled the carpet out and just went like, look what we did. We did
But
it.
what's the one thing they don't need any more of in their catalog
Oh,
is great dive watches.
for sure. For
Um,
sure.
that being
But
said, I do think we're going to see a new dive watch. I just don't think it's going to be a Tudor sub.
no, it'll probably be another one of the big black bay. We'll see a white dial,
Well,
big chunky dive watch.
even
Uh,
ignoring new colorways and all that sort of thing.
yeah.
We've seen them move to a very regimented, like with the Black Bay, you've
hmm
got the Black Bay 54, then the Black Bay 58, and you kind of climb up the sizes until you get the big Black Bay. And they've started to do the same thing with the Pelagos. But now with the Pelagos Ultra last year, which you're right, is just a knockout.
hmm
Um, I think this is the year that they discontinue the 42 millimeter standard Pelagos
Oh,
and probably replace it with a 41 millimeter version of the watch.
oh, okay.
And
All
that
right.
way it fills in that 39, 41, 43 spacing. You've still got the 42 millimeter FXD. That's kind of its own thing. It's not an exciting prediction, but I think it's possibly a very accurate one.
Interesting. I did have someone DM me and say that their prediction was a blue dial P39, which I mean, everyone is calling. I thought a lot of people are calling for that watch. Obviously, I don't know. It's hard. We saw the moon phase 1926. I find it hard to believe that the moon phase is just going to be used in that watch and moved on. The Tudor Royal has just been kind of sitting there.
Wonder how much space there is going to be for more Tudor Royals. And I know Rolex and Tudor aren't too worried about stepping on each other's toes.
Not
Um,
anymore. Yeah.
but, you know, there is for a long time when people would say to me, why isn't there a new version of the Oyster Quartz? I would point to the Tudor Royal and say, that's where they've done it.
Yeah.
And now that they do have the Land Dweller,
Yeah. That's
you
yeah.
wonder about the future of the Royal. I hope it doesn't get discontinued. I hope they keep iterating on it. It's a
I
great
like it.
watch.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Um, the 34 millimeter Tudor Royal is a real stealth winner.
hmm Yeah,
Uh,
it's a pretty good watch, and it's
and yeah,
for the price point. It's hard to beat too if you're looking for
yeah,
that style of watch. Uh, it's obviously
yeah.
a bit, a bit iffy if you're not into it. And Tudor is known for their tool watches, not necessarily dress watches, but overall, it is a pretty
Yeah.
stunner when you
I
get it
could
in
see
hand.
that getting some attention, maybe bringing in in-house movement to the watch. slimming the line a bit. But
My one big prediction for Tudor this year is the Tudor North Flag. And I know that that might not be the sexiest pick for them. It might not be the most historically important watch for them, but it was the start of in-house. But it also allows them to avoid the contentious history of 100 years of the Tudor name. It allows them to avoid that storytelling while still continuing the storytelling of we are now in-house, we are pushing things forward, bringing back a model that people really like and people lust after, and really innovating and being known as an innovator, not just a Rolex sub brand. Because I think that was really that watch for me signaled a separating jumping off point, and I think that it did for a lot of people too. So that's my
absolutely. Well, okay. How about what if it were this? Because you're right. I don't think the North Flag is necessarily the greatest encapsulation of Tudor's whole history,
mm-mm.
but I could absolutely see Tudor saying, we're relaunching the North Flag this year. It's a modern icon, blah, blah, blah. Do it in titanium. And so it's something very modern, feels very much like a contemporary Tudor. And then do something like gold chronograph or a gold Ranger, that 36 millimeter Ranger in a gold case, I could absolutely see
Oh, that would
happening.
be cool.
If they did it in a silver case with a silver bracelet, I would buy it the first day I could get one.
Yeah,
But
yeah. The only people doing 925 right.
yeah,
All right.
and I would just love to see something. We will see something big from the brand this year. There's no avoiding it.
We will, and whether that's related to the 100th anniversary or not, Tudor is they still give us at least one big thing to talk about every year, which is interesting, and that's Tudor's big thing. Let's talk about us, just to kind of round
Yeah.
out our main topic here. I want to end the main topic by talking about our New Year's resolutions, because this is something that I think a lot of watch collectors do. I think a lot of watch enthusiasts do. We kind of look back on our year, we look forward on our year, and we talk about things that we want to change or continue or improve on in our watch passion going forward. So, Griffin, did you come up with a few watch New Year's resolutions for yourself?
Well, I have one big one
Okay.
and one or two small ones. The big thing is I did a thing that no one who collects anything should ever do.
Okay.
And that is early in the new year, I tracked down every single watch I own and I laid them all out on my dining room table and I counted them.
Oh, you shouldn't do
And
that.
no, but what it made me realize was I own way too many watches.
Mhm.
Not because the number itself was specifically too many. You know, I know collectors who own way more watches than I do who own the right number of watches for them.
Mhm.
But for me, if my goal has been to be a bit of a collector, the reality is I've been more of an accumulator.
Yeah.
And so this year, and I've already started, I've sold a bunch of watches so far this year. My goal this year is to sell everything I don't wear. Emotional connection be damned. If I don't wear it, it's going.
Urge.
I'm not going to succeed in that. But a big part of the idea is I want to get rid of a lot of the stuff that just kind of sits there and
Mhm.
wrap it all into one watch.
Wow.
Um, we'll
Good
see
for
how far
you.
I get. But, you know, I think not to make too big of a thing of it because I'm not a big fan of birthday watches as a concept, but my 30th birthday is later this year. There is
Mhm.
something to that idea of just using that as a bit of a reset and a restart.
Mhm.
And I think owning less when I turn 30 will make me happier going into that decade.
Yeah, I think there's something to that too. I mean, I bought a birthday watch for myself when I turned 30 that ended up being a watch that is I mean, it's my favorite watch. It's the watch that I wear the most often. Um, yeah, and it means more to me than a lot of my other watches. So I understand the sentiment there, and I have a similar thing that I'll talk about here in a moment. But I it's a dangerous game you're playing because it makes you realize how much money you've put into this hobby, and how much more you're going to put into it. But do you have a
Mhm.
specific target in mind? Do you have a watch that you're going after, or is this really purge now and then you have the reserve for when the right thing comes along?
I have a couple that I have in mind.
A couple. Okay.
I have 2 or 3 that I'm kind of I could see myself going in those directions, and I'm gonna keep that a little closer to the chest for now because I
Totally.
don't wanna say something now and then be held to it 6 months from now. But I have some ideas. I think I certainly have a direction,
Hmm.
and, it does feel good to even if I don't quite get there, I'm sure I'll have to put some new money in. It won't just be funded by selling stuff inevitably. Um, it feels good to be collecting with an intent.
Yeah.
And collecting doesn't mean buying. Collecting also means selling. So I'm collecting
Absolutely.
with intent again, and that is my goal. My goal for 2026 is just to do everything with intent.
Very
Collecting is
cool.
part of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if one of them happens to be an IWC Mark 18, let me know. If that's one of the things that you're lusting after, I might be able to hook you up with a pretty good price on that one there. But that's a good one. Okay. I'll give you one of my big ones then too before we get into your smaller ones because mine is very similar. I mentioned at the very top of this podcast that I hadn't been wearing the Formex Reef GMT a whole lot, so I pulled it out and I put it on my desk. So every day I sat down here to write, I was looking at it and then made the decision if I wanted to wear it or not, and then made the decision if I want to keep it or not. I'm doing kind of the same thing. So I'm looking at 2026 as a bit of a consolidation year because I did that a little bit last year. Well, no, that's a lie. I said I was going to do this last year. I said I was going to consolidate last year, sell off a bunch of my watches and put them into other watches. And what ended up happening is I sold off 3 watches and then bought 5 watches and then just stopped. And that's a problem. So this year, I'm making it a point where I'm going
Mhm.
to consolidate a lot of my collection that I just don't wear because there's a large portion that I don't wear. It just sits in boxes on the shelf, whatever the case may be. I have a couple targets in mind, but I also I don't necessarily want to consolidate to then purchase more. I want to consolidate to own less. But then I also want some playing money in the hobby because this year I also want to use that instead of accumulating new watches to dabble in vintage a bit more this year. More specifically, neo vintage, because vintage sizing proportions don't really fit my wrist all that well. I want to play in like the late 90s, early 2000s, because that is really where I find some like really weird styling choices. The design language is really funky, and I really, really like it. Specifically, like Omega and Breitling, and all of them are doing some really weird stuff. And the watches are big and they fit my wrist, and they're still pretty affordable. So yeah, my big resolution for this year is to consolidate to meaningful pieces of my collection in order to then play in the vintage market in the neo vintage category. That's the big one. Huge, huge task. It's not going to happen quickly. I'm still going to end up with more watches than I wear, as you just mentioned. But yeah, that is my big one, and you have a few small ones too. So let's jump into a couple small ones here.
Well, and these are less resolutions and maybe more projects.
Hmm.
As I've shared with you, right around the new year, I was incredibly fortunate to wind up with a really beat up old Porsche design chronograph.
Yeah, man, what a
Uh,
piece.
it just kind of fell into my lap in a way that if it hadn't happened to me would infuriate me.
Hmm.
Um, but I want that watch to be working and wearable by the end of the year. Ideally way sooner, but I've already taken some steps. I have to do some things like I need to source a new crown, I need to source a new crystal. I've got some feelers out on that. Once I've done that, it's going to need some real servicing.
Hmm.
But fundamentally, I want to be able to wear that watch at New Year's next year. So that's just a big project for me.
Interesting. That okay. I I swear we didn't collude on these resolutions at all. But one of my small ones that I want to spend more time inside of watches. So I'm working on a project right now, a video project where I am repairing my Seiko Turtle. That'll be coming out here actually pretty close to when this podcast goes live. where I'm finally taking apart my Seiko Turtle that has been broken for 2 years and I still wear it even though it's broken, and I'm fixing it. I'm actually fixing the movement rather than just putting a brand new movement in there. So I'm finally doing that, doing it on camera so people can have fun and follow along. Uh, but I also came back from New Year's and had one of the worst things that can ever happen to you happen. And that is that my now 21-year-old Omega Planet
Oh,
Ocean, yep, the crown tube, the threads on the crown tube broke off and are now inside of the actual crown. So I cannot screw down the crown on my Planet Ocean, and it is now sitting inside of a Ziploc bag so no moisture gets inside. And I now have to go to Omega to get my Planet Ocean serviced. And it got me thinking because for those of you who don't know, Swatch Group does blanket pricing on their servicing. So for $700, I take that to Swatch Group. They send it off, it gets serviced. But what that means is that it is a full servicing. And I can tell them, hey, please don't polish this, but that doesn't mean that they won't. Please don't replace parts, but that doesn't mean they won't. And so
mm,
there's a good chance that this comes back looking brand new. But if I go to a small watch shop and I have them, and again, if I could just have someone replace the crown tube, but realistically, like this movement needs a service. It's time. It's 21 years old and it's never been serviced, so it's time. If I go to a watch shop and I get this serviced and I get everything done, it's going to cost me more than $700. So I might as well do the full Omega servicing. That got me thinking about the whole process though of like, I want to, maybe not on this watch, but on my other watches, I want to be more proficient in what I'm doing. So in watches that I have that have been sitting in my drawer for a while that are broken, my resolution this year is instead of just letting them sit there broken, I'm going to take all of them apart. I'm going to fix all of them or break them worse. One way or another, I'm going to end up inside of those watches and I'm going to dissect them, diagnose them, and hopefully fix them. I'll do them all on camera too so people can see what's going on. And hopefully by the end of the year, I will be happy knowing that I have spent more time inside of watches than I ever have before, learning more about the movements than I ever have before. So hopefully becoming a bit more ingrained in watchmaking than I have before too. So
yeah.
small resolution for me, but one that I hope to accomplish.
No, but I also have to send my Omega Seamaster, similar era Omega Seamaster for servicing this year. And I
Ooh,
admit I've been experiencing the same hesitation of, do I want the blanket service?
yeah, it's a tough one because it's going to come back looking new, which is great for most people. But for those of us who have worn their stories into the
Hmm.
watch, it's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that, that nick that I put in there when I smacked it on a rock trying to surf, well, that nick's not going to be there anymore. It will be polished out and my case will be thinner because of it. So that's something that I'm struggling with. But anyway, that's my resolution there. Do you have any other resolutions for the year?
I need to stop buying straps that I know I'm not going to enjoy wearing.
Yeah, tell that to my bag of straps sitting in the other room. Yep.
uh, I did a massive strap purge earlier this year. Um, for those unfamiliar, in the TGN Slack, there's this great thing called the traveling strap box where people send it around, and there's now many boxes, and you take a couple straps out, you put a couple straps in. I had my turn with the box this fall. I took one strap out, I put in like 35 straps, and not bad straps, like, just to be clear, good straps, high quality straps, just things I will never wear, like striped 24 millimeter NATOs that I've been holding for watches I don't own anymore and will never. And I just need to stop. It's not that I'm going to stop impulse buying straps. That's not going to happen. But being a little honest with myself about buying straps that I actually want to wear as opposed to straps that I think will look good with a specific watch and I'll take a few photos and never wear it again. That probably needs to cut that out.
Yep. Fewer better things. Follow your own advice and cut down on the consumerism.
Exactly.
That's a good one. I should follow your advice on that one. I mean, apart from that, I don't have any other resolutions. That's it. That's it for my resolutions. Just the two: get inside of watches a little bit more and then shrink the collection as much as I absolutely can because I am sick of staring at watches that I don't. Do you have any other resolutions on your list?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I've been doing some journaling and other things this year to try and be a better person, but we'll see how long that lasts.
I have no interest in being a better person. I'm happy with the level of trash that I have put out in the world here. So I'm good with that. All right, let's jump into the final portion of our podcast. Before we close out here, I do want to play a quick little game.
Okay.
Oh wait, hold on. All right, this is a simple game of this or that. So, Griffin, you are going to pick either A or B, after which I am going to reveal the topic, one of which you will be defending with your life in 1 minute or less. And then our audience will decide whether you won the argument or I won the argument. So, after you defend it for 1 minute, then I have to defend the other one in 1 minute or less. Are you ready to choose which one you're going to defend?
Not at all, but let's do it anyway.
All right, would you like A or B?
I will take A.
All right, our topic today is stone dials versus skeleton dials. So you have stone dials to defend in 1 minute or less, after which I am going to be defending skeleton dials. And then our audience will tell us who won this debate. So I am going to go ahead and start a timer here on my phone for 1 minute. Griffin, you have 1 minute starting now.
Okay, I genuinely came down on the right side of this because I am a huge fan of stone dials and I am not a fan of skeleton dials particularly. Specifically, I'm not a fan of poorly executed skeleton dials, which more often than not they are. Stone dials either work or they don't, but there's less room to actually mess it up. I also think they're a great way of turning a watch into something unique and one-off without having to completely overcomplicate things. And let's just be honest, there's very few stone dial watches that don't work on some level. I think the Denison's done a great job, but even going back, old Rolexes with stone dials are unbelievably cool, and they give you a different texture that is hard to find in any other way. And texture is so much of what makes a watch interesting.
Wow, that was 1 minute exactly. All right, your time is up, and I'm going to go ahead and start my timer now. 1 minute on the clock. I have skeleton dials, and boom, going now. All right, you want to talk about texture? I'm going to talk about depth. Skeleton dials give you so much depth. We're sitting here talking about mechanical beauty. You can stare into the movement with a skeleton dial. Now, I'm not talking about low end skeleton dials, I'm talking about high end. You talked about Zenith having a defined design language. Zenith is pioneering skeleton dials unlike anyone else out there, and they're doing it with just incredible mechanical engineering. This is something that if you were to stare at a bridge and talk about its beauty, you could do the same thing with a skeleton dial watch. You look at the Golden Gate Bridge and it's amazing. You're not going to stare at a rock on the beach and talk about how beautiful it is. You talk about how stone dials are all executed well. Absolutely not. There are so many that are flat. There are no textures. There's nothing going on. Every skeleton dial has some level of depth, whether you want to admit that or not. It is absolutely true. Now, yeah, some might be a little bit darker, some might be a little bit lighter, but you can play with materials more and they're not scarce. You're never going to run out of them. I'm out of time. Anyway, that's our
First
conversation.
Off, I disagree. You are occasionally going to stand on a beach and look at a rock and be like, "Oh, that's beautiful."
I have done. Anyway, that's our game. That's our game of this or that. We'll leave it up to our audience to pick who won that argument. There, you can
I
let us
think
know.
we can agree neither of us did.
Let us know in I guess in our DMs there, or again, this is going to release on Mondays in the audio format, or on Tuesday mornings 10 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube. So you can go on YouTube and leave a comment down below. Let us know who won the argument on there, and the winner will get a very coveted prize that we will figure out. Maybe we'll figure out punishments instead of prizes. Maybe there's a punishment for the loser rather than a winner's prize.
like
I don't know.
fantasy football punishments, go sit in
Yeah.
IHOP for 24 hours.
We'll figure that out. I saw someone on a fantasy football punishment. They had to get a job at a Burger King, and then someone else actually had to become a content influencer, and it was really funny. He was just doing it with like the most pessimistic tone ever. He's like, "Today's day 5 of me being an influencer, and here I am working IT. This sucks." It was awesome.
That's
Such a fun
fantastic.
tone. Anyway, that's our game of this or that. Let us know who won the argument. Before we close out the podcast, though, we do want to give our cultural or I guess whatever recommendations we have out there. For this one in particular, though, I think we both chose cultural recommendations. Griffin, I will let you go ahead and go first because you brought two. So let's flip back and forth. You go first, I'll go second, you go third.
Yeah, well, both of mine are from the same place, same YouTube channel. But I think it's hard to deny right now that if anyone is winning the branded content game, it's Huckberry. Their video content is unbelievably good. They've really honed in on a tone, a look, and continue to just execute it brilliantly. So the first piece of it I'm going to recommend is a recent episode of Huckberry Homes that they did, looking at Matt Hranek's house in upstate New York. And aside from it being just a beautiful home in a beautiful part of the country, Matt Hranek un- unsurprisingly speaks about it very well. And it's, I think a lot of people, I've been a big fan of prefab architecture for a long time. I think a lot of people, when they think of prefab, think very cold, very stark, very utilitarian. And Matt's house is a really great example of how warm and welcoming and inviting a prefab home can be. And to have it in a part of the world like that is just unbelievable. It's absolutely worth the watch. I shared it with my mother, who is a trained architect, and she has never watched a Huckberry video in her life and was like, "Are there more of these?"
Mhm.
So that would be my first.
Very cool. Yeah, Matt is an awesome guy. I actually just met Matt for the very first time at a JLC event right before Christmas. Had an awesome time chatting with him. He critiqued Blake Bettner's outfit in a very hilarious way. He said he looked very Midwestern. And from that moment on, I really liked him. So it was just a really good time. But that video is a lot of fun. And he talks about things in a very interesting way,
Yeah.
very non pretentious way, which was very
Hmm.
cool. Yeah, really like that one. My recommendation is also a video too. It is on YouTube. So this is another free video for those of you out there looking to consume some content. It is called Curious Clocks and Watches Through Time with Oliver Cook, Curator's Corner, Season 8, Episode 1. So the whole point of this one is it's at the British Museum. Oliver Cook is going to walk you through a bunch of really weird random clocks that they have that are either on display or not on display because they have a huge assortment that they can't show you at all times. Really cool thing here is he walks you through some vintage clocks and pocket watches that have really weird mechanisms that ultimately make most of them not very efficient or effective at all. And he even tells you that there's really no point in owning these because they're not going to work. But the mechanisms inside of them are very cool. They're very interesting. They're very eclectic. I thought, honestly, Griffin, this is a video that when I watched it, the first thing I thought of is I have to send this to Griffin. And then I decided to save it for the recommendation here. So I highly recommend people watch it because the clocks are just so weird. You're not going to see them anywhere else unless maybe by chance your grandmother owns one and it's sitting on her mantle. Very, very fun video and one that it's an old video, so you might have seen it
Yeah.
already, but hopefully you haven't.
I have not, and I will be watching it as soon as we get off. Have you ever been able to go to the Clock and Watches exhibit at the British Museum?
I have, yeah. So I was there at British Watchmakers Day last year. I actually went through and had a tour with Andrew Cantor, who goes by Mr. Watchmaster on Instagram. He gave myself and Zach Kazan a tour, and I had goosebumps the whole time, like hearing the history of the watches and clocks there with the man himself. It was an experience that I won't forget, and yeah, I mean, he talks about that stuff with such passion that there were things I did not care about at all that I walked away loving. What a cool place to be. Such a
Yeah,
cool place.
absolutely fantastic. And if anyone's going to London, it's worth hitting that. And then the Science Museum in London also has an incredible exhibit about the history of watchmaking, which includes the single coolest Patek Nautilus ever made, which is a really beat up Nautilus that George Daniels fit a coaxial escapement into.
Okay, so I saw that at the British Museum. They had it there on display at the time when I was there. So yeah, such a weird thing to see. I saw that and I was like, what the heck is going on here? Anyway, yeah, that is my recommendation. Griffin, you have one more for us.
My second recommendation is also, as I said, a Huckberry video, and it's what should still be the most recent episode of Huckberry Dirt, which was an exploration of Maine and specifically the food scene in Maine. Um, if you've not watched any Huckberry Dirt before, you absolutely should. If you're looking to scratch the itch that has kind of the scratch itch of kind of the Anthony Bourdain kind of
Mhm.
really get to know a place videos, these are the best I've found in a while. This episode's like 45 minutes. It's watch it on a big TV. Don't watch it on your phone. Um, but it's an unbelievable episode, and I don't want to say too much because the experience of seeing it is part of what makes it so good.
Yeah. Well, and if you haven't seen that one, you probably haven't seen all of them and you should watch all of them. I actually haven't seen Maine yet. I've been saving that one. It's on like a watch later playlist. And I'm waiting for a period of time when my partner's traveling and I'm home alone and I can just cue it up on the big screen in the living room and sit there in the dark with like a big pizza and a giant 2 liter of Diet Coke and just be disgusting and, and watch dirt all by myself.
That's
So
great.
yeah, that's amazing. That's beautiful. A great
Yeah.
recommendation.
And especially, we both love Huckberry. I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt from Huckberry right now. It's a great brand and their content has just been out of this world.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, their content is incredible, and finally getting the props it deserves. Because for a long time it was flying under the radar and nobody knew about it, and now it's finally blowing up. So definitely check that out. Well, Griffin, this was a very long episode. Thank you for joining me on this episode, the very first episode of the Time Well Spent podcast here. Hopefully, to our listeners, I mean, if you like the 2 hour episode, let us know. If you like this podcast, let us know. We will do more. If you want a shorter podcast, but you did like it, let us know that. And if you hate us and you don't want us to ever do this again, keep it to yourself because we're going to do it anyway. Griffin, thanks for joining me this week. This was pretty cool.
Thanks for having me, Devin.
Yeah, for sure. And to everyone who tuned in, we do really appreciate you being here and hope that it was time well spent for all of you.